Well, I was 21, 22,
22.
right?
Yep.
When we got pregnant the first time. I say we, but we were young, still in college. I was getting ready to join the military. There was just so much going on at that
Right.
time. And, when you're in college, you're broke, and we both, there was a financial challenge, remember, but there were some other things, that were kind of in the way. I was wanted to be above reproach as an Army officer, and back then that was very important, as an Army officer. You are setting the example. I would, be a single mom, because we were talking about marriage, but we weren't talking about it.
Right. It
really.
was, we hadn't finished college yet, and my goal was to finish college, and I really felt that that it just wasn't part of the plan to be parents and not graduate, not finish school, and then have the burden at the time of a child, and maybe having to step away from school and take bad jobs, and then kind of start a life like a lot of people do when they're not ready
it's
to
tough.
start off.
Yeah, and we had, I had family pressures. I was going to be the first person in my immediate family to graduate college, and I was going to have a successful military career, and my parents were very proud of that. They didn't have a lot of opportunities. They had grown up in the segregated South, and so there was that pressure, and not to be that statistic too, not to end up being the single black woman trying to raise a child, by myself. So there was a lot of that pressure that was going on also. And, I guess I was a little rebellious too, as you could see us being, interracially married. That was we didn't care, but, I know my parents would, at times, and other people in the family, it was a little uncomfortable for them, and they had their concerns and that.
And I had concerns too, because I know at that point in my life, I was still having fun and, living life, and wasn't ready to, I knew I wasn't ready for the responsibilities of a child.
Right, yeah.
So that, played a factor into that decision,
yeah.
I guess.
Right. It was a difficult time, very, just being young. And, the thing was, that you would hear friends saying was that, you get pregnant, you could just have an abortion,
Right.
And then it's done, and you move on. It's done, and that's it, and no big deal, and,
And then the second time, when things happened, it was much later. Everything was planned out. It was the right time for a third child, because we've had two since then that, grew up great. It was.
We wanted a
girl. They were 10 and 8 years old. We were, looking to add to the family.
Right. I really wanted a girl. We were married. We'd been married, about 15 years.
Yep.
And so I wanted a girl. I really wanted a girl. And he said, okay, sure. And the pregnancy wasn't going too well.
Right.
But we didn't really, we were concerned, but the doctor had a lot of,
the doctor was really concerned about her birth weight and how the pregnancy was progressing.
Right. And we had an amnio, and I know with the amnio there's a 25% chance of miscarriage, but she was very concerned, and so we just didn't take the time to research. Again, we were so happy, and I didn't think why would there be any problems? My mother had me at 45, so I just figured this is not that big of a deal, I'll be fine. But we got the results back, and it was trisomy 13.
Yeah.
Right, which was very severe form of mental retardation, and the doctor's recommendation was to terminate the pregnancy, because she said that's what many of the patients that she would see, that was the decision, that they would make, and that's what she was recommending for us, and we were devastated. That was a very, very rough pregnancy, and just we were about 4 months.
About 4 months, yeah.
Right. We were 4 months with that pregnancy, and I had to deliver in the hospital. They did the abortion in a hospital in Detroit, and just scared. We were very scared, and just it was an experience. That really was. I think that was one of the most devastating. That's the most devastating thing that we've had.
Yeah.
After we were married. I mean, we'd had the first abortion, but, being married, thinking that you're moving on, or, at least you thought you were, this was going to be a happy event. It just didn't pan out that way. And immediately I went into the mode of, I'm being punished. God was punishing me. God was punishing us for the first abortion, and those were things that I didn't share with him, with Jim. But that's what I was feeling at the time, and scared to go to the pastor and talk to him because of the termination that we had had before we were married, and I was worried about being judged. What would people think? There was also, and people can't, sometimes people, they think they're saying the right things, to try to talk to friends. And I can remember a friend of mine saying that, this black and white, as if there was some problem. And I'm like, no, that doesn't have anything to do with it. So at that point, I just stopped talking to people. And that's when things kind of begin to go a little downhill for me. And we had, along with that baby, with the termination of that pregnancy, we had a lot of loss. My mother died, his grandfather. It was like all within 18 months' time that we had so much loss. And the pain from those few months of losing a baby, a lot of people don't look at abortion as a loss because, they say you make that decision, but it really is. It's a loss. It really is. And you do need to grieve it, and you need to have some closure with it. And I went into a deep depression and had a lot of anger. And that second abortion triggered all the feelings that I had during the first abortion that really sent me on a tailspin, wouldn't you say?
Mm-hmm.
The abortions really, for me, they influenced the relationship, I think, because we didn't talk a whole lot afterwards. We were hurting very much individually, but we weren't talking. And so there started to be this breakdown of communication between us, and it's more so me that was starting to withdraw too. I started to withdraw. The abortions, I started to withdraw. I was really starting to suffer, but I wasn't communicating that to my husband. I was not communicating that to Jim, and I was angry. And so the communication started to break down, but I can really say, when I think back on it and look how things were going between us, a big part of, I took on a heavy burden of it, and I was not sharing that with Jim. I was not saying, that, listen, I'm depressed, I'm angry, I'm mad at you. I feel like I'm not loved, like you're not getting it. You don't see, I guess the big thing was, why don't you see that I'm hurting? That was what I was thinking to myself. And why I didn't think to say to him, I'm hurting, I don't know. I just suffered silently, would go into the bedroom a lot and just close the door and not want to be bothered with anybody or anyone. And to the point where, I would get up and function during the day, but once the evenings hit, I just went back to the room, closed the door, and didn't really realize that I was doing that until I started to get some help. So it really put this wall up between us. So.
With one another.
Well, I think the abortions affected the relationship between us because for a long time, I didn't know what was wrong. There were periods where she'd go into kind of a funk, and because we were young and, struggling when we got out of school and everything, naturally you think it's because of money or circumstances. So a lot of things weren't communicated. We had even gone to marriage counseling, and this never came up. So again, when later on when things started to come out, it was my reaction to it was, why didn't you say this was an issue 4 or 5 years ago? I understand in retrospect, especially after the second time, that probably helped to bring out things that weren't out on the table before. I wish I had known, so it was something we could have, talked about, because I felt that a lot of this was a mutual decision, and, I didn't know that it was just something that was, kind of being heaped on me, whereas I thought it was something that we, both kind of shouldered together. And then the second time, it was a very, very difficult decision, but I thought that time especially, we were in it together, we both talked about it, I felt that we were both on the same page, and unfortunately it was, a decision that we both felt that for the mental health of her, myself, and especially our 2 children would be a benefit in the long run. Well, the abortions affected me, I guess, in different ways. The first time around, it wasn't that I didn't care or that I didn't feel anything, but at the time it was kind of like more of a pragmatic decision where, okay, we're trying to map out a future. We're not married. This wasn't planned. This was an accident that it happened, and we felt that we were operating jointly. I now and then I would feel, when I'd see certain things on TV or read certain things that would bring things up. Years later I was brought up Catholic, and I had went to confession, and the way I was raised Catholic was, I believe that I went to confession, I made internal peace with it, and I believe I'm forgiven for my sins with confession and things that I do on a daily basis. And I thought, more importantly, that the way I interacted with the children that we had, I think that experience of the first abortion made me feel closer and more of a responsibility to them. And the second time was a little different because we were older, we were married, and it was more of a decision I felt it was more of a decision to protect the family more so than tear it apart. I mean, it was, from what we were told by more than one doctor, it was a, just devastating diagnosis that they had given the baby. And I didn't want to see, my kids, most importantly, I think that was one of the biggest things that factored talking about terminating that pregnancy, was how the children that we had would react to it. And what would it put them through to see a baby born and then stay in a hospital and suffer and, for a month, 2 months before it passed away, or before she passed away, sorry. I felt that time around that we had a lot more communication. We're way more mature, and we're, more able to handle that situation. So, what was going on with me, as it pertained to these abortions and Laverne's mental condition, was that we had made a decision that Laverne would stay home and raise the children. I had a job where I had to interact with people a lot of people on a daily basis. I had to travel, I had to keep a fairly high profile with my company. And I felt that I had to do whatever I could for the preservation of my employment, the income, the stability of the house, was to keep as much of it internalized, I guess, so I'm able to function on a daily basis. And again, I felt the way I reacted to it and the way my emotions were with it, I felt at peace because I had done my confession, I had asked for forgiveness, and I feel I had it. And again, not knowing that all these things were going on inside of Laverne, I mean, that's how I dealt with it. Well, I feel better about it because I don't feel better about what happened. I feel better about the situation between Laverne and I because it had been brought out, it had been talked about. And I can't, as much as I may want to, I can't change what happened in the past. All I can do is go forward and know that, through the way, we've stayed together through 2 abortions, we've raised 2 kids that have turned out, in my opinion, pretty good. I think I've, again, made my peace, and I think I've taken that and worked it out, within myself and through the family.
Oh, word of hope. I had gone through a previous, I had gone through a Bible study and had gone for counseling and had started to go, had healing and was doing very well. And one of the things that came out of my healing was that I really wanted to start to encourage other women to seek counseling and to be healed from their abortions. That was really important for me because my experience no longer became just about me. It became, for me, it came to light that a lot of women were hurting, just like me, and that they were suffering in silence. And I was doing a study in helping women, but as time moved on, within my church, I really wanted to help women within my congregation also. And, belonging to the Lutheran Church, I knew we had a study, but I wasn't very familiar with it. I knew Word of Hope exists, but I wasn't as familiar with it as I was with the study that I went through for counseling. So I contacted Pastor Bill Yonker, who was part of the Lutheran Missouri Synod Church, and he married my husband and I, as a matter of fact, 21 years ago. And so I contacted him, and he just really, really encouraged me to contact Grace. He was part of Grace. I believe it was the first training class that she had put on for pastors. And so he said, hey, call Grace. She would love to have you. We need women, and I'm sure she would just love to talk to you and hear your personal story. So I did. He really told me, he says, I'm gonna, call you back and, give you some accountability on it. And I said, okay, not a problem, because I really have a passion. I want to see women not suffering. I want to see them better and moving on with their lives, and, having them know that there is life after abortion and God does heal, and he died, for our sins. So I contacted Word of Hope. I called Grace, and we talked and we shared. I gave her my story, and she talked to me about the many women that she's talked to through the years. And I said, I feel so encouraged. I would like to help out with Word of Hope, and it increased just my faith, my faith walk, and really gave me a lot of courage and strength to talk to other women about healing and calling Word of Hope and wanting to really get this ministry going within the church. So I can't tell you, how much my life has changed, and just looking forward to see so many other women change through Word of Hope. Word of Hope, what Word of Hope did for me was it brought me healing. That was the start of of really healing. I had gone to a counselor and started to talk to the counselor about the abortion experiences, and but there was something that was missing, and I had started volunteering in a pregnancy center, and I had never heard of any post-abortive studies. I had never, it was there at my church, but I had not heard of it. I got connected with Word of Hope through a friend who had gone through some abortions herself, and she recognized the symptoms that I had. She saw the depression, she saw the anxiety, she just saw how I was so unstable emotionally and mentally. And I had told her that I wanted to do some volunteer work, and it wasn't in a crisis pregnancy center, but that's what she told me, where I needed to volunteer. And so I started volunteering there, and then through there, and from her, I was encouraged to seek counseling through Word of Hope, that to go through that post-abortive study and become healed myself. What Word of Hope did for me was just pulled me closer to God. Okay, really made me seek forgiveness, repentance, all those things that I needed to do with my abortions. It changed my life. I worked out anger issues. It made me a better wife, made me a better mother, made me truly, that healing helped me to identify all the things that I was struggling with from those abortions. It gave me hope. It really gave me hope. I guess that's a big thing. It really gave me hope, and let me know that I didn't have to really suffer anymore, and that I didn't have to live in silence, and that there were other women that was suffering also, and that had regrets too, and we all needed to share our stories and help each other get through it and to heal. So, and that's what it did for me. And then just allowed me to grow in my faith and to really start to encourage other women, to seek healing. Yeah. So it really turned my life around. Word of Hope made a difference because the way it made a difference was that it just allowed me to live. I wasn't living before. I was struggling with, the depression and anxiety and the low self-esteem, and even though I was achieving some things, I still wasn't living. So it really allowed me to live and start to have the courage to pursue the things that I wanted to pursue, which was, really reaching out to women that were hurting, and doing what I feel what God was calling me to do. I was able to really discern with what use discernment and figure out what God wanted me to do, what He was calling me to do, and just reach out to other women, pursue the passion of helping women, which is something I had been wanting to do for years and years, and I just couldn't do it. And you can't do it if you're not healed. So that's the difference that it made. I'm living.
Well, the main differences I saw when Word of Hope came into Laverne's life was that things that weren't discussed before kind of came more out, even though I think at the beginning of the program, a lot of it was it was meant to be a lot more personal toward the woman that went through it. So I understood that at the beginning, part of it were things that we just didn't discuss so much, and I kind of felt that it was best to leave her and let her go through that part. But I think the biggest difference that I saw was that we were able to communicate more on I don't know how to put it, but it was something that wasn't talked about before then we were able to discuss, even though the beginning discussions, of course, weren't really good because we weren't on the same page emotionally about what her feelings were and my feelings were, but still it was getting it out there and being able to talk about it. And, I think in the end, not only did it help her heal from the abortion trauma and everything, but on a broader perspective, her volunteering so much time into the pregnancy centers and doing things like that, I think as tragic as it may have been, I feel everything kind of happens for a reason. And if these two things happen to us, and as, devastating or whatever as it was, if that was something that was able to, if one person she spoke to or two people she spoke to avoided having an abortion or maybe avoided making the choice to even get in that situation, then, it was, I hate to say it was worth it, but, I guess that's kind of how I felt, is it was kind of worth it. Well, when she first began, as I said, with Word of Hope, the initial changes were that, again, a lot of it was very personal for Laverne. The changes that I saw within Laverne and that went out toward the marriage was that it probably helped to make things stronger because we were able to communicate. Whereas in the past, we were not communicating about that subject. It felt like the other things, financial and otherwise, were more of what the issue was than having had an abortion. I think God's direction was that He put Laverne into a place where she was able to take a tragedy and turn it into something that's going to help and has helped other women. It's helped save lives, and it's, maybe it's helped some women not choose to go the route of an abortion, or it's, put women on a different track. I had personal feelings about abortion that I felt strongly that it's a woman's choice, when it comes to a political thing, stay out of it. And when I did see the changes that Laverne went through and the kind of material and the subject matter and everything that came up through Word of Hope, it did make me have a very different perspective on abortion, and what it's there for and why people use it. I had taken a human sexuality class, and it was kind of funny in a way because it was an online class, so you got to share in an online forum different stories and read different things that people would say, and some of the responses were like, wow, I felt exactly like that 15 years ago, and now reading something that somebody else was saying is like, no, you're kind of wrong. That's really not the way you should look at it. And especially everybody says, well, I don't agree with abortion, but as long as it's to protect the woman's life and it's not a form of birth control, it's okay. But the sad part is that when you look at the rationale that people are using it and where the statistics come into play about abortions, most people, they are in fact using it for birth control, and it's not, okay, we're facing a life and death situation, we have to make a choice. It's, so that made me, feel a lot different. Well, I think the spirituality, I feel that comes into play. If a person is going through Word of Hope, they obviously have a spiritual connection. And I feel that women such as Laverne have felt that, okay, I've let God down, I've done this horrible, horrible thing that I can never be forgiven for. And I think the benefit from Word of Hope is that you realize that, well, that's not true. There's, God forgives people no matter, maybe not no matter what, but I mean, God is supposed to forgive. If you believe and you repent, God forgives you because Jesus died for our sins. And I think that some women probably think that, boy, this is the worst thing I could have ever done and I'll never get forgiveness. And I'm going to beat myself up for eternity because I've done this terrible thing. And I think Word of Hope it kind of reinstalls the spirituality and the knowledge that, you know, God does forgive you and you have God's love no matter what. I don't know what would have happened had she not gone Word of Hope. My gut feeling is, had she not gone through the program and the counseling, that things would not have gotten better. Things probably would have deteriorated to the point where we may have been looking at divorcing or at least separating, because, you know, it was such a huge issue to overcome that her not being able to confront it and get it out through the program would have kept it internalized. And if she had continued to keep it internalized and we never had conversations or discussions, going to more marriage counseling wouldn't help. Until she overcame that within herself and through Word of Hope, it probably would have been very devastating for our marriage.
If you really, really believe God's word and you really believe in you believe in marriage, you can save your marriage. You know, but you've got to go get the help, the counseling, and seek God's healing. You have to seek God's healing in order to begin to get on that road to healing. And communication, that's such a big key. And staying together for us, that was it. Someone, maybe it might not be both of you together at the same time, but someone needs to take that first step in the marriage to make it all work.